Hello and welcome to another Doctor Who Big Finish review. In today's Doctor Who Big Finish review, I'll be reviewing the Monsters of Gokroth. What a 7th Doctor title that is, and it is a 7th Doctor story, but it's not just any 7th Doctor story. Oh no, it's not an M&S story, it's a Big Finish story with Mags. Oh yeah, that werewolf from Greatest Show in the Galaxy. Yeah, which I actually quite like. I think it's my third favourite Sylvester Mccoy story. I think it's brilliant. So we're about to start the second trilogy of the main range for 2019. If you want to know my thoughts on the Chameleon trilogy, I'll put links there in the little cards and in the description below. And also, cheeky little plug, me and JR Reviews have recorded our top 10 new series stories. So if you want to know my 10 favourite stories from the modern era, then check out that video in the link in the description below and the cards there. And it's a video that will certainly raise your eyebrows because we haven't picked some of your conventional stories, what you'd expect to be on the list. So yeah, this story is by Matt Fitton. Now, I'm a big fan of when the main range does a few subtle changes, because I feel like for the main range to keep being fresh and exciting, it needs to constantly change, and each year I feel like we should have a different Doctor with a different companions, and this is a prime example because we're getting the return of Mags. Now, Mags obviously has returned since Greatest Show in the Galaxy, last year actually in the 7th Doctor comics, not in the main comic itself, but in a little mini comic strip at the end of each issue, which is quite nice, where we see Mags running the psychic circus. And this story explores why Mags left the psychic circus, and this story is all about inner monsters. So without further ado, let's look at the presentation for this release. Then we'll go on to my thoughts on the Monsters of Gokroth. So taking a look at the presentation for the Monsters of Gokroth, we have the planet of Gokroth, we have Mags, we have Gaul, we have Dr. Maliva, the Doctor, and then we have the TARDIS in this sort of title sequence bubble. Then we have the sort of castle in the background there, which is all very nice. And the spine of the release, the Monsters of Gokroth, 250. And the back of the release, so if you want to know more about the story, then do feel free to pause. And then we have the cast list there and the total running time being 2 hours. At the leaflet, we have production credits there on the side, then we have advertisements for Doctor Who magazine, and we have a lovely photo of Jessica Martin and Sylvester Mccoy, and the next instalment in the main range continuing the Mags trilogy. And we have the reversible cover there if you want to change it to be Sylvester McCoy. And the disc art is exactly the same for both discs. So what I'm opening thoughts on the Monsters of Gokroth. Well, I have to say that this story is one of the most difficult stories I've had to review for a bit. Not because of spoilers, because of how torn I am, whether I like it or not. Because when I'm listening to this story, I thought, you know what, this is fairly enjoyable. But thinking back on reflection when writing this review, I'm not too keen on it, I'll be honest. It's one I'm very conflicted with, because this story didn't really do much for me. This story for me is a mixed bag, as it has a lot of elements what I like. Because the story is a cross between Dr. Monroe and Frankenstein, with Robert Holmes' characters, what feels very akin to the brain of Morbius and a very melancholy 7th Doctor, which is when the 7th Doctor works best, for me personally. With these elements, you would think that this would make a perfect marriage. However, the story somehow never gelled correctly for me to go, you know what, this is a perfect marriage. It's a very odd story for me, but when listening to it, I thought, you know what, I'm enjoying it, but when I'm coming to reflect on it, it's not that great, I'll be honest. So part 1, I have to say, it sets up the story rather well, with some excellent world building, with this town in terror of monsters in the forest, and monsters taking families from their homesteads in the dead of night. So the people of Gokroth are prisoners of fear. And now this story really does build up the fear factor of these monsters, and of course, we have a creepy castle and thunder and lightning, which is very brain of Morbius. We have the Doctor in the shadows observing the situation and is hunting something. And we have, of course, a mad scientist who is blamed for these monsters with all these messed up experiments, which links to why Mags is on Gokroth. The villagers send out a signal for help to get rid of the monsters, and their call is answered in the form of Varon, who is, in my opinion, very much inspired by Vorg from Carnival of Monsters, that sort of showman character. But he's slightly more deranged than Vorg, with him wanting to free Gokroth from its monsters. And I will say that the monsters themselves are pretty cool. And I will say the cliffhanger is very much traditional Doctor Who classic cliffhanger. Part 2, so this is when the Doctor is reunited with Mags, which is an absolutely lovely scene. We find out, you know, what the Doctor is hunting. You know, we learn why Mags is here. And, you know, we have a bit more about her backstory, why she left the psychic circus. And we explore the monsters a lot more, them forming sort of civilizations and habitats in the forest. Now this is part, in my opinion, is the most 7th Doctor episode out of the 4 episodes. This is the one where I feel like, yeah, this slots into the Sylvester Mccoy era brilliantly. Now this is when we sort of see the brutality of Varan's monsters, because Varan obviously is a showman and he has his own sort of freak show, and his sort of monsters are quite, let's say, deranged, and you feel quite sorry for them because Varan has done some horrible things to his monsters. Now the cliffhanger, I will be honest, is good, but my problem with the cliffhanger within episode 2 is it just feels very much like the same as episode 1. So it's very much a good cliffhanger, but it's just exactly the same as episode 1's cliffhanger, in my opinion. Part 3. Now the second half is more action based stuff with the monsters of Gokroth versus Varan's monsters. So this part is when it takes a bit more of a moral turn. With are the humans the real monsters, but the Doctor is still hopeful that the villagers will do the right thing. With the villagers right now will kill anything what is different. Now this part is when it drops the bombshell of a twist, and I say a bombshell, I'll be honest, I found the twist quite predictable, and I think possibly if you listen to the story you might find it predictable. It's meant to be this massive revelation in the story where you go, oh my god, that's incredible, this is an amazing twist. But it just falls flat for me. I found it a very predictable twist. Another thing with episode 3 is it feels like the story is wrapping things up and you think the story's going to finish any minute now. But then you realise, hang on, I've got another episode left. So in my opinion, I feel like this story would have worked a lot better as a 3-parter. Which is not a new thing for the 7th Doctor era, because if you look at most of his stories are 3-parters. Part 4. Now chaos descends with the villagers coming to destroy all that is different, and the Doctor's trying to stop more bloodshed and horrors being unleashed. Now the Doctor really shined within this part of the story, and we expand more on the scientist Maliva, and we do have some gruesome moments within there, and it's kind of a bit sort of like Nightfort. If you listen to Nightfort, it kind of has a similar type of feel to it within this part, in my opinion. And in my opinion, I feel like this story is setting up a bit of an arc with the Doctor wanting to help Mags, because this story kind of sets up Mags trying to control her werewolf, sort of transforming. She, doesn't want to just become a werewolf randomly. She wants to learn how to control it. So I feel like this is kind of setting up that arc of the Doctor trying to go, look, I'm going to try and help you. So moving on to characters, the Doctor played by Sylvester Mccoy, yes. A brilliant performance by him, with him being very melancholy and saying he has an urge to finish some unfinished business, which I absolutely love that idea. I absolutely love the idea that he has this urge to finish unfinished business before he regenerates. It kind of reminds me of Persuasion, that other 7th Doctor audio in the Will Arrowsmith trilogy, where he goes in Persuasion going, look, I have to finish this business because I feel like the man I'm going to become won't be able to cope, and I love that. So I'm a big fan of that kind of 7th Doctor vibe within the story, and because he knows his days are numbered. So we do have some lovely touching moments, like I said, with Mags, but McCoy, in my opinion, really does shine in episode 4, and we do have some classic Sylvester McCoy traits like the spoons, and we have the yo-yo, which is used quite effectively, and I find that quite a charming moment when you see him just playing the spoons and using the yo-yo. I just thought it was really charming, and I just love the idea of the 7th Doctor in part 1 just observing things from the shadow. I just think that's when the 7th Doctor works his best, when he's just lurking in the shadow, waiting to step in, because he knows what's going on, but he's just waiting for his moment to go, look, I'm going to take charge. So, Mags, played by Jessica Martin, a brilliant performance as she fits into the main theme of the story incredibly well, with her trying to learn how to control her werewolf self, which leads to some quite dark moments with her saying, if she can't do this, then she might as well kill herself. So Mags is very conflicted within this story, with her using her werewolf senses and just wants answers, which I think that this is a great story to reintroduce Mags. I feel like you don't have to watch Greatest Show in the Galaxy to understand Mags' character, because I feel like this story does a perfect enough job to reintroduce Mags, or in fact introduce Mags to you. So I feel like this is a nice little story to introduce you back to Mags. Varan, played by Jeremy Hitchen, the deranged Vorg character, brilliantly played by him. Very Nightfort's character ending with his messed up monster show, so he's a naturally flamboyant character because he's being this sort of showman character, and he's always thinking of how can I exploit the village folk and their monsters, and yeah, he's a bit of a sick and twisted character really, which kind of fits the theme of the story very well. So in my opinion. What are my overall thoughts on the monsters of Gokroth? Well, I think at its core there is a good story. It reintroduces Mags incredibly well with the theme of inner monsters, and like I said, there are elements of this story what I really enjoy. The 7th Doctor story feeling like a Robert Holmes story, but to me it just never gelled together. The monsters come across a bit generic after a few scenes. The major plot twist was predictable. It just felt like a very safe release. So whilst I did enjoy myself listening to this story, it's just when I come back to, you know, sort of evaluate the story and sort of, you know, take off my enjoyment head and go, right, let's be critical, the story doesn't really stand up in my opinion. I feel like the characters are great. Dr. Maliva, the sort of scientist character there, is brilliantly done, and obviously she has a character twist which I'm not gonna say, but it's a story what I feel very conflicted, because though I enjoyed it, it just seems like a very, you know, safe release in my opinion. It does everything what it should do. It introduces us back to Mags, but as a release, I don't know. Would I recommend this story? That is the big question, and my answer is I don't know. I feel like, ask me in a couple of months' time when the Mags trilogy is finished, and you know, we'll see how all three stories link together, because this story does hint at the next story about Mags going back to a home planet, and obviously the next story is Mags going back to a home planet, so they may link in that form, but for now I don't know if I would recommend it. I feel like if you're a 7th Doctor fan, then you're probably going to want to get it because Greatest Show in the Galaxy. I'll be honest, the story didn't do much for me, so it's a very mixed bag. So I am very torn with a rating. I feel like, I don't know what I would rate it. I feel like I should give it, you know what, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. I feel maybe a 6.5 at a push, but for now I'm going to go for a 6 out of 10. Yeah, it has all the makings of a good story. You know, it reminds me of a Robert Holmes story, and obviously Robert Holmes is a very prolific classic writer who I adore. I love his stories, and I love that the story has a more melancholy 7th Doctor. You know, it's just the elements just never gelled right together, because I feel like there is a really good idea within this story. It just, I don't know, I feel maybe if it was a 3-parter, the story would be a lot better. Like I said, you know, it wouldn't be wrong if this was a 3-parter, because the 7th Doctor era did have quite a few 3-parters, so it is a very, it's an odd story. It's a story what I'm conflicted with, because like I said, I did enjoy listening to it, but it's when I come to, you know, write this review where I realised its flaws. So, like I said, I don't know if I will recommend it just yet, because obviously I want to see how this trilogy plays out before I go, yeah, I recommend this one because it links into the next story. You know, it's one of those stories, you know, where I feel like I have to wait for the other 2 stories to get a firm judgment on this trilogy. But I feel like it's a safe opening start for the Mags trilogy as a whole, but it didn't hook me as much as I wanted to. And I'll be honest, Matt Fitton is a writer for me where he can be extremely brilliant, you know, like Stage Fright and Escape from Cawdor, brilliant stuff. Or he can do stories like A Life of Crime, which is one of my least favourite Big Finish stories. He's a writer of what I can either love or hate. It's a weird one with me and Matt Fitton. Ever since Doom Coalition 2, I've been a bit iffy with his stuff, especially the Sonomancer, which is, God, a terrible audio. But yeah, Monsters of Gokroth, brilliant 7th Doctor title, some brilliant ideas within there. It's just the story becomes a little bit messy. So I'm going to give this story a 6 out of 10. I hope you have enjoyed this review, and I'll see you on my next Big Finish review, whatever that will be. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. So thank you very much, and goodbye.